he said there are elites that enabled this rise, and somebody should consider training up people that will replace them. Because it didn't happen from 2016 to 2020. So somebody's got to plan ahead for next time. And so with all the hubris that 20-somethings can have, Saurabh says, we could be the guys that do this. It could be us.
This is not a business where you take polls. It's a business where you think. You're not right or wrong because 1,000 people agree.
Nick, great to see you, man. Thanks for coming on the pod.
Excited. Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man, of course. Yeah, excited to dig into American Moment and what you guys are building. I think we can jump into the origin story, how you guys got started, but just sort of at a high level, what interested me about what you guys are doing is there's a lot of overlap, it seems to me, between what American Moment does for the for-profits, or so for the nonprofit side, for political side in terms of moving people, and what New Founding does, where we move people into companies and ventures. So we identify credible, motivated individuals and move them to high upside startups and companies. You guys do something very similar, but on the political side, you identify people who should be working for particular senators who should have a career on the Hill, and you help them move them to the right places. Can you tell me a little bit about how American Moment works, what you guys do, and maybe we go from there?
Yeah, so we're primarily focused on personnel development. So we identify, educate, and credential young Americans that seek to implement policies that support strong families, a sovereign nation, and prosperity for all. There is certainly a lot of synergy between what we're doing and what New Founding is doing, which is why we work with you guys so frequently and see each other at all the same events. But primarily what we're focused on is, creating a new generation of staff, particularly for members of Congress, conservative organizations, presidential administrations, and allied businesses, to the extent that that's necessary to implement these policies that we really care about, that President Trump ran on in 2016. Something that I don't think people talk about enough is that what Trump ran on in 2016, it kind of gets pitched as this, you hear this a lot in the term new right? I despise this term. I don't despise people that use it. I know a lot of great people that use it, and that's fine. But the reason I despise the term is because there's nothing really new about it. I mean, you can draw now it's not a perfectly straight line, but you can draw a sensible line from people like Hamilton to Henry Clay to TR to Nixon to Trump. It's not an insane thing to say, this kind of neoliberal consensus that we've had for the last 40 years prior to 2016. That is really the deviation from the norm. If we're talking about the new right, that's probably what it is more than anything. But really what we're focused on is, creating a bench of folks that are both experts in policy and then, actually caring about the issues that we care about and be able to implement those priorities.
Yeah. And you guys do it in a particular interesting way where so these positions, the internships, where you get, at least as we've talked in the past, some of these positions are internships. They're not paid by the member of Congress or by his staff or his team, but American Moment as a sort of intermediate layer enables, it's like a paid internship. American Moment takes care of that, brings the people, educates them, and also places them into these roles. So it provides an incentive for people to come to DC for a summer beyond just, I'm going to intern with so-and-so for 3 months. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I basically think about, our personnel placement in two different ways. On the higher level, there are people that are already in DC, maybe already working in the conservative movement, might be stuck in a job working for an organization or a member they don't like very much, or working on an issue they're not very passionate about. But they care about the suite of issues that that we care about. And so they come to us and they say, hey, I really want to serve this movement. Ultimately, I want to serve the next conservative president. Can you help me out? And so a lot of what we do is, and again, the synergy between you guys and what we're doing is great. Like we're the very simple way to explain it is like we're just finding jobs for our buddies. Like that. Like that's the high end. The people that we believe in, of high moral integrity, people that we know are going to work super hard and are very passionate about the suite of issues that we care about, helping them to get jobs where they're going to have a higher impact than where they are now. And then on the lower level, this is where the identify and educate piece comes into play. DC as a town and kind of as an institution has a way of pre-selecting for the worst kinds of people on the planet. Much of the conservative movement, as well as most Hill offices, entry level, super low paid. These numbers have been adjusted now because of inflation. I think a starting salary now on the Hill is like a legislative correspondent is something like $40,000 a year. But when I first moved to DC in 2018, you were getting, if you were coming into a congressional office, you had at least a bachelor's degree, maybe a master's degree. Coming into your first job, you were going to be making $35,000 a year to live in what I think is the second most expensive city to live in America, and not a very fun place to live at that. And so, what this does is this prevents the kinds of people that built this country from being able to actually advise members of Congress, leaders of allied conservative institutions, and presidential administrations from being able to have an impact in DC. It pre-selects for the kind of person that comes from an elite educational background, particularly a high socioeconomic class where, they're trust fund kid, like dad can just pay for them to live and they can spend that, 35 to 40K on hookers and blow. It doesn't matter. And so what you find really frequently is this kind of it's a caricature of the common Hill staffer, but it's so real, like single, unmarried, sad, going on drinking binges every night, waking up at like 5 a.m. to wash the hangover off you, and then show up for a day of work advising some of the most important people in the world. And it's really depressing, honestly. And so we're looking at this, we're seeing, all these great people from all over this country coming from blue collar backgrounds, middle and low tier schools, maybe people who didn't go to university at all, but really care about this country, and the issues that we're passionate about. And there's really no way for them to get a seat at the table without knowing somebody and having someone able to basically pay the way for them to be able to live in DC. Back in 2018, it would have been 2017, I got an offer to intern for an unnamed member of Congress that's now in Republican leadership to be an intern with them. And they were super excited. I'm fluent in Spanish. I grew up in Honduras, and so I was going to be, working on their Hispanic outreach and that sort of thing. And then I found out that the internship was unpaid. Well, it's like, I'm one guy, I live alone. My parents are missionaries abroad. None of us have any money. I can't afford to do that. I can't afford to move to DC for an unpaid internship. And ultimately I had to turn it down. And so when we started American Moment, and even before we launched publicly, we talked about this problem, that there were so many good people that really needed to have a seat at the table, and like very brilliant people, but also people of very high integrity, folks who actually have a stake in this country. They're married, they have families, and they really care about our country. And so that is how we came up with the Fellowship for American Statecraft, which you were talking about. It's kind of our flagship academic program. Basically, the way that it works is we had 10 in 2021, we had 12 last year, and then we have 23 this year. And we basically take all these kids from across the country. We prioritize people that are immediately employable. So people who didn't go to university, are already done with university, or graduated like 2 weeks before they started the program. And we pay them $3,000 a month as a W-2 employee. And a quick note about that, I will say this is a play that gets run on interns in DC all the time. You know, they'll give some stipend, but they do it as a 1099, and then you get screwed on the taxes at the end of the year. It's a way to save money on the employer side, and I detest it. And so we've done W-2 every year. So we do $3,000 a month that way. We also provide retirement benefits, a gym membership, and then this year we rolled out a $100 a month networking stipend so that they can buy coffees for people in positions that they want to be in, so that they can get, career advice, that they can learn more about the issue that they're working on, and find a way to get a job. The ultimate goal of the program is that 90% and upwards of our fellows would roll straight into a full-time job at the end of the summer. So they intern with the destination that we place them at 4 days a week, and then they spend all day on Friday basically getting indoctrinated by us. We provide all the ideological training on, immigration, foreign policy, trade, all the issues that matter, and then a lot of like tactical stuff too. Here's how House and Senate procedure works, how you can use these kind of quirks of the system to get your way. Here's how you write, effective press releases. We even did a resume workshop. We do case studies on states that are really pushing the edge of and the boundary of what's possible in conservative America. So I'm really proud of this program. We have dozens of people now working in the conservative movement who have been through this program. It's been a great success, and I'm looking forward to seeing it grow.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's so many questions I want to ask just based on that. One of them is like, why is it that this kind of incentivized, or no, let's not incentivize this structure that enables somebody to move to DC and get paid and all this stuff? Why is it that this is outsourced to you and is not built into like congressional, the congressional staff? Like, why can't they pay people to come intern for them? Is it built into the bylaws of how, federal regulations of how you can or can't pay people? Why is it that an American Moment has to exist for people to be able to go through this pipeline?
Yeah. So what I would say to that is that, and a lot of people might not know this, but like House and Senate offices get kind of an allocated budget depending on their position. So, if you're like a chair of a subcommittee, you'll get a certain amount of budget for your office, and then for the subcommittee staff and that sort of thing. Resources are stretched really thin. It's very hard. There's a salary cap on what you can pay in the House and the Senate. Ranges. I don't know the exact number, but I think it's somewhere between like 160 to 200,000 a year, which, if you're looking at hiring people with, very high levels of experience, whether it be in the tech sector or in business or whatever, is like peanuts. That's like nothing to the kinds of people that, you want running a House and Senate office, and advising members of Congress. And so, I think the answer to that is really like, they're just trying to give as much money as they can to attain the best people possible. And internships is kind of something that's usually left by the wayside. A lot of what interns end up doing when you're a congressional intern, this is not the case for any of the offices that we place interns at. But frequently they're deputized to do basically like Capitol tours and answering the phones, which is valuable work. That's important. Like constituent services stuff is real, and knowing how to talk to someone you've never met on the phone is a good life skill. But usually as an intern, you're not going to get to really like touch any policy or anything like that. So I think the internships, generally speaking, on the Hill have been something that have been underutilized. It's not frequently used as a tool through which, you hire somebody at the end of the summer. Whereas for us, we're really focused, like the KPI for us is like, our goal is for people to actually get jobs, not just have someone like paper pushing the whole summer. So how many people are we getting jobs? It's pretty black and white.
Sounds familiar.
It's pretty high standard we set ourselves to. Yeah.
We live in that world every day.
Yeah.
But so what was the catalyst for you guys getting started with the whole project? Like, you're a fairly young guy, same with your co-founder. Like, what was the impetus for spinning the whole thing up?
Yeah. So for the people out there that don't know, I am the old sage of American Moment. I'm the oldest one, and I'm 26. And Saurabh, one of my co-founders, is 25, and then Jake, our other co-founder, I think is 20. He's 22. Hopefully you won't kill me for getting that wrong if I'm wrong. And then we've got a couple other guys on staff too that are all younger than me. But it's a very, very interesting journey starting American Moment. As I mentioned earlier, I moved to DC in 2018. I was running the DC office of a startup. I was doing web and app development, and we were doing a lot of like political projects and that sort of thing. So that led me to opening an office out here in DC. Through kind of a crazy series of events, I ended up giving a lot of advice during 2019 and 2020 on the administration's policy in the Arctic. So I worked primarily with Congress on the Polar Security Cutter program, on opening up the U.S. consulate in Nuuk, Greenland, and really just giving members information about the Arctic, because nobody, really knew anything about it. There are like 4 experts in DC, and that's it. Expert is probably a very high title. I read some books and articles and watched some YouTube videos and knew some things. I had been there. I could at least say that much. So, end of 2019, I got invited to this like DC trivia event for conservatives. It was like really cringe. I got like dragged, like I did not want to go. And it's actually a fun fact. I met my wife and Saurabh the same night. So kind of very interesting. Yeah. Like if I had not gone, my life would be totally different right now. So, I met my now wife at the beginning of the evening. We talked for like 5 minutes. And then I met Saurabh, who was visiting from Texas. And we closed down the bar together. Spent the whole time talking about all this Arctic stuff. He was, just as he is, super interested in everything. So we had a great conversation, and then, went on our merry way, expecting, nothing bad to happen at all in November of 2019. And then COVID hits, world kind of goes crazy. I'm living in DC, he's in Texas. And he started this it was like a group chat. We called it the Zoomer War Room. And we started getting on Zoom once a week and just like talking, because we were all in our apartments. We were all told this is super serious. You need to take it very seriously. You need to stay inside. And so we started, Zooming and talking every week. So he and I started talking a little more, texting, that sort of thing. And then let's see, I got the article pulled up here. It was in, April of 2020. There was this article that came out in the American Mind, great publication, many people are saying, by now U.S. Senator JD Vance, called "End the Globalization Gravy Train." And because I'm a responsible human being that goes to bed at a normal time, I woke up in the morning to a text from Saurabh that had been sent at like 2:30 in the morning or something like that. He was like, hey, you got to read this. And me, you, and this other guy, Jake, that you've never met, need to get on the phone tomorrow. Like, that's okay, whatever. So we get on the phone, and he like, I'd read the article, and he was like, we could do this. Like we could be, and for those of you that haven't read it, JD is talking about a whole host of things going on with the regime at that time between COVID, increased globalization. It was becoming apparent how much our economy was tied to manufacturing in China. He said there are elites that enabled this rise, and somebody should consider training up people that will replace them. Because it didn't happen from 2016 to 2020. So somebody's got to plan ahead for next time. And so with all the hubris that 20-somethings can have, Saurabh says, we could be the guys that do this. It could be us. And, me, I'm the more like business ops guy, that's kind of my background. So in my head, I'm kind of like, okay, whatever, dude, sure. I guess we could do something like that. So, I was thinking, this will probably be something that we do on the side, that we work on a little bit, but I'm still going to, stick with what I'm doing now. I'm making a good amount of money. And so we start meeting every week about it, start kind of building the plans for what this organization will be, what exactly we want to do with it. So things we, lined up right off the bat was kind of our pipeline, like how we're going to place people in jobs and that sort of thing. We talked about the fellowship, the podcast, and then a couple other ideas that we, eventually ended up scrapping and never using. So we're working on this behind the scenes, not telling anybody about it. My wife likes to claim that when I first told her about it, I threatened to make her sign an NDA. I'm sure past me was joking. But yeah. And then, December was like late November of 2020. So I was like, I'm going to take a month and I'm just going to travel the whole country and see if we can raise money for this thing to like actually do this. And I didn't have very high hopes for it. I believe in Saurabh a lot, even more now, but it was like, who's going to, give money to just a bunch of us young guys, excited about an idea.
Was he very well politically connected at the time, or?
He was reasonably well connected particularly in Texas politics. He had just come off of running Young Conservatives of Texas, their biggest like fundraising year ever. They had hosted the biggest gala ever the year that he was president. And he had a bit of experience in that. But he defied all expectations and went and raised I think it was like $150,000 or something like that in December. And, thinking about like our budget now and thinking about, the budgets of these other conservative organizations, you'd be like insane for three guys to quit their jobs to like start something on that amount of money. But we, for some crazy reason, decided to do it. So we picked a launch date in February of 2021. And we have been, building the plane as we've flown it ever since.
That's amazing. Again, so many questions we could get into there. So you talked about the globalization gravy train as the or that article is kind of the catalyst. That's a good article. We'll put it in the show notes so people can read it. Beyond what Senator Vance calls for there, so you had a problem that you wanted to solve that cost you to start American Moment. Did the problem that you were trying to solve, did it evolve as you actually started doing the work? Did you figure out, okay, we need to fine tune what it is that we want to do, or obstacles that you didn't expect that you had to all of a sudden account for? How did that original thesis of we can be the guys that train the next generation that will replace the regime folks, the marginal class, how would that thesis evolve as you actually started doing the work of placing these people in jobs?
Yeah, one thing that I did not expect was the amount of pushback that the conservative movement has had to try to return to the pre-2016 consensus. To me, seeing Trump's win in 2016 and the things that he campaigned on and how it emotionally animated people who had never voted, but the kinds of people that built this country, blue collar workers, innovators, all of these people. I thought it was kind of a foregone conclusion that, hey, this is the direction that we're going, so everybody should get in line. What I did not anticipate was the conglomeration of, large institutions that are still dedicated to returning to business as usual. So this is something that I think we still have to fight on a day-to-day basis. This candidate over theirs. The candidate that has been through this programming and not that one. Because there's this huge institutional desire, not just driven by donors, but driven by people who have suckled at the teat of these sinecures for the last 2 or 3 decades. They really desire to kind of do the Men in Black, pretend this never happened, flash you in the eyes, and it all goes away. So as time has gone on, I think we've really had to figure out where we fit in that niche, and going up against organizations who have like large donor bases, like 50 times bigger than ours, hundreds of staff or whatever, and kind of telling them like, hey, this is the way that we're going. So you really need to get on board or get out of the way. I think too, in terms of like tactical alignment on particular issues, I mean, we're founded right away really to focus on the administration staffing problem, and what it is kind of evolved to in the meantime while we wait for the next presidential election. We're not sitting idle. We're building the list of those people, but we've also ended up doing a very large amount of this staffing on the Hill and at conservative institutions, helping people to find a place where they can be impactful now, they can get training now, they can notch wins in their belt now, and then those are people that we can slot into an administration later. So I think the midterms, even though we only eked out a victory there, that was a huge battleground for us, because you were having all this committee staff we're changing over, all these new members, bringing in new staff and that sort of thing. So that's something that we didn't think much about in 2020 while we were working on this, but it's turned out to be a very large part of our program. And the reason for that is, and for our focus on that, is that the left is so good about having this revolving door of institutions and sinecures for people to cycle in and out of. So like you even see this with the
patronage networks.
They have a patronage network. You even see this with that trainee guy with the mustache that steals African women's luggage.
Sam, whatever his name is.
Yeah, whatever. He's already got some kind of, I can't remember seeing what it was. It was like college professorship or something like that. They even take care of their people when they're embarrassing. So imagine how they're taking care of people when they're successful. And so that's sort of what we're trying to do now is work with other organizations, Hill offices, including organizations like new founding to create our own revolving door of people that can cycle in and out of, government, conservative institutions, movement groups, allied businesses, and that sort of thing. I think we're not going to keep the best people if we can't reward them, and so we have to find a way to be able to do that. And so that's become a pretty large part of our mission.
Yeah, you got to reward your friends and punish your enemies.
Yes, as the great Sir David Azarad says. I find myself citing that a lot.
Yes, it's a good thing to cite. I'm curious on that point, Nick. So, and kind of going back to the history of this, I think of it as a kind of a startup. That's my framework. We come from startup backgrounds, but so you raise the money, you quit your jobs, you get started, you're starting to kind of iterate through the problem that you're solving. How do you? And there are two key things. Then you need to attract people to join the program so that you can place them, you can train them, you can place them. And then you also need, on the other side, you need to develop the relationships with members of Congress and organizations so that you can actually place the people, not just attract people to the program, but then say, here's a job for you and here's an intern for you, or internship for you. How did you go about, as the new kid on the block with three young guys, competing with, institutions and think tanks with massive existing donor bases and budgets? How did you go about solving the attraction problem on the talent side, and then the relationship, the business development, as it were, with the placement targets?
Yeah, so I'll start with the attraction problem, and I hesitate to use the word problem because to these kinds of
startup sort of lingo, you're like, this is the thing we have to solve. But yes,
well, the reason that I'm not identifying it as a problem is because it comes so easily for us. I think, like, us being young guys, we actually understand what's motivating these people. Excuse me. So thank you. So I think what's really attractive to a lot of the people coming in through our network is a couple of things. I think, we're very easily accessible. We plug this all the time on our podcast. We have it on our website. We have this form called AmericanMoment.org/join. And if you fill out that form and you just say, like, I'm interested in getting a job or an internship in DC, I want to be more plugged in with American Moment, you will meet with one of us. It's either me or Sarab. We kind of have like a rotating thing, but but if you listen to our podcast and you're like, oh, that was really interesting, I'd want to work in that. You can have a Zoom meeting with this podcast host you're listening to within like 2 weeks. So I think that's part of it, is we've made ourselves very accessible to fellow young people.
Was the podcast pretty early on? Did you guys launch that? Was that part of the idea before you launched American Moment? Like, we need a podcast, or did that develop as you were kind of running this?
Yeah, so we launched day one with a podcast. So our first episode was with Sagar Enjeti and Marshall Kozlov on the realignment, and so we did like a cross post with them, and that was our first big episode, and then now we're on, I think we just released episode 111. So we've done a lot of episodes since then. But I think part of what's very engaging to that sort of audience is, like, we get it. We're motivated by the same types of issues, particularly like things like crime, immigration, wage stagnation, not being able to buy a house. Like, these are things that we talk about a lot more than other organizations or other Hill offices or whatever do, because we're uniquely experiencing it. Like, we're right there with you. And so I would say that a lot of the young people that are coming into our network were radicalized by the same things. And so there's not really for lack of a better word, like, we're kind of a safe space to talk about what you actually believe. And listening to one episode of our podcast makes that plenty evident. So I get probably 3 or 4 like either cold emails or someone filling out a form a day. And that's mostly just like podcast and Twitter. We don't do any like ads or anything like that. It's just like people seeing what we're doing and loving it. And then I meet people at conferences, networking events in DC all the time. And it's a lot of this, like, you guys are the only ones I know talking about X, Y, and Z. I want to get involved however I can. And so we can kind of begin the vetting and education process on from there. So on the intake side, that's pretty easy. On the more, like, as you're saying, the business development side, finding places to put people, that's certainly more of a challenge. There's not as many people in DC that are ideologically aligned with our perspective as there are people out in the country that believe the sorts of things that we believe. And so what we found to be most motivating to those offices and conservative organizations is I think there's kind of this misnomer about people think that we're only placing based people in based offices and organizations. And while we do a lot of that, I think what's actually most effective is when we place people in an office where that member may only be ideologically aligned with 4 or 5 of our priorities. And the reason that works is no member of Congress is willing or has the time to read thousands of pieces of legislation and keep up with constituent communication and all of that stuff on their own. And so they really heavily rely on staff to give advice, to read all this legislation, to keep them up to date with what's going on. And if you're in a not super aligned, kind of normie GOP office and you have, one of our people in there giving the right advice, I think that goes a long way to changing how members vote, especially if you can do it at scale like we're trying to do. And so what's most motivating for those kinds of offices, again, like the based and red-pilled office that just like loves us because of what we believe in, pretty easy to slot somebody in there. The less ideologically aligned offices, the play there is usually we are going to provide the people the highest moral integrity and the people that are the most knowledgeable and are going to work the hardest. So you might be, hiring for a press assistant, which is like a super low level, kind of entry level if you're going on the comm side in a Hill office. And you come to us and you say, listen, I've got like 30 job applications. None of them are really great. I need like the best press assistant you can find. That's kind of been our way into a lot of these offices is that we are really going to focus on minting press assistants and legislative correspondents kind of on the lower level and make them the best ones you can find. And that's putting them through writing training, that's putting them through ideological training, making sure that they're like not insane, not going out and partying every night and showing up hungover to work. We really try to find the absolute best of the best. And I found that to be super effective and a pretty easy way to get people in on the ground floor in non-aligned offices.
Yeah, that's cool. How do you guys vet? I guess one question before that: how many applicants? You only take, you said 20 this summer. You took 20 people, 12 people.
23 for the fellowship.
Yeah, so 23 people for the fellowship. How many people apply to that?
Couple hundred.
Yeah. So how do you go from that couple hundred to the selecting the 23 that make it into the fellowship?
Yeah. So it is quite a process, man.
You basically don't leave your house for what, like May?
April
and May as you're going through these resumes, or what?
Yeah. So basically, the way that we do the application, we try to set a very high barrier to entry. Like when we were first starting, it was, we don't want hundreds of applications. We want like 50 really good ones. And so we set the bar pretty high. We have like several short essay response questions, about your family background, what's motivating you, what issues you're most passionate about, who you draw your influence most from, your favorite book and why, like very in-depth. And then we require like several references, writing sample, resume. So this is a pretty high bar. And we put the application out there, and our like super high goal was we want 50. We want 50 people to fill this out. We launched it the day we launched the organization, and we were going to leave it open for a month, and we wanted 50 people. The first year we got 207 people filled the whole thing out, and nobody knew anything about us back then. So it's kind of crazy. The way actually initially that we did it was we had a form on our website, and we would export all of these applications into a CSV. We did this 2021 and last year in 2022. And we had it, and it was like you had to scroll several times side to side, to read the whole person's application. So you'd knock out a bunch of people, right away, and then you'd start back up at the top, and you'd say, all these people are definitely going to get in. We just have to do like basically an interview as a formality, but this is great. As long as they're presentable, like I'm sure it'll be fine. And then all the kind of edge cases, like this is pretty great, but you're not going to graduate for a year. We definitely want to give you an interview, but we'll see what happens. And it's basically like 3 weeks every year of, and everyone on the team takes interviews. And so then it evolved to like, we had tabs at the bottom of like all the potential fellows that were getting interviewed by each team member and all the notes on them. And it was an insane system. I cannot believe that I ever allowed it to get that bad. But yeah, we would sit in these like 5 or 6 hour long meetings, like going through every single application, and then another like 3 to 4 hours, haggling over like, okay, if we're going to accept that guy, we have to accept this guy that I interviewed, this guy rocks. He's awesome. And so it was a lot of that. And then we actually rolled out an ATS this year. So it was much more organized, but yeah, man, it's still weeks of all of us getting in the weeds, doing all these interviews, taking a bunch of notes on them, calling all their references. And it definitely takes like a year off your life each time you do it. It's a lot of heartbreaking stories and telling people they're not accepted and that sort of thing. So it is difficult, but what it does is, at the end, we have all these different buckets of people. So you have the very few number of people that applied and very obviously didn't read our website. So the people that say the biggest thing that I care about is the most freest market possible and tax cuts. Those are the only things I care about. It's like, okay, you didn't even look at our website, rejected. And then you have all the people that are great applicants, but aren't going to graduate for a couple of years. They're not immediately employable. They're considering law school. So those sorts of people, we say, hey, this was great. When you're closer to being immediately employable, we really want you to apply again. Please do that. And so we encourage those people. And then you have a great bucket of people who, we really try to gear the fellowship toward people who don't have experience in DC. So if an application comes across my desk of a guy who's already had 3 internships on the Hill, our conversation with that guy becomes, what can we do to get you a job now? Like you already have DC, you don't even need this fellowship. Right. We can just get you a job now. And so then we, spend a couple of weeks trying to find all of those people jobs. And then you have, the cream of the crop, the people that make it into the fellowship. And then it's another like 4 to 6 weeks of matching, fellows to destinations and issue areas, and getting them all to DC, helping them find housing, all of that. So it's about a 2-month long, process end to end. While at the same time, we're planning out all the curriculum, the food, where we're going to host it. Like, we have so many people this year, we had to get like schoolroom style desks that have the tray table that fold over your lap, because we didn't have enough room for people around tables in our office. So it's definitely a whole effort all spring to get this thing off the ground.
That's pretty awesome. We're laughing here, not at the process, but I think it's so familiar to how talent got launched here, and all the systems, and you kind of duct tape things together, and you just
and you make it work.
Rules of data, and you're like, all right, well, we need to, here's a ton of jobs, and here's a ton of people, and who's good, and how are we going to match this? How are we going to match them? You just kind of do it by hand. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So somebody makes it through the application process. Do you ever see, and other people get rejected? Do you have people who apply one year, don't make it, and then they come back maybe a year or two later, and then they get in, where they've leveled up, not just in terms of graduating, but something else in particular, like they've leveled up, or they've learned, they really now read the website, they know what you guys are about. Do you see those kind of return applicants at all, or is it mostly one shot, one acceptance rate?
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had any libertarians that have decided they've been reformed come back and apply again. I would have to go back and check the data about that. But as it relates to people that we've encouraged to reapply, I think we have 2 or 3 this year that have applied for the program every year, and so that does happen. And we highly encourage it. I don't think we've had many rejections, aside from the libertarians, that have been very, that they've had any sort of animus toward us. Like, they still engage with our content, they understand where we're coming from, and then when it's time for them to be immediately employable, they do come back and apply. So that definitely happened last year, happened this year as well. That sort of thing does happen.
That's cool. So I'm kind of going through the journey, the start, and then do you attract the people and do the business development, finding the jobs, then you do all the vetting, and then the matchmaking. These people finally get to DC, the fellows that have been accepted. They get to DC, they're young. And like you said, they usually don't have experience on the Hill. This makes me think of a piece, and I'll ask a question in a sec, but this makes me think of a piece that Aaron Wren wrote recently, I want to say in the last month and a half, about how conservatives need to understand. This wasn't the title. I should have read the title before we got on, but essentially his thesis was conservatives need to understand the game of politics, not just like, there's a president, the executive branch, the legislative branch, but like how politics actually work. A lot of the conservatives have never even tried to run for school board or looked into how their local politics work. And so it is a game. You need to know how to relate these, to different pieces, and who to talk to if you want certain outcomes, and who to avoid if you don't want. Like there's a certain shrewdness that comes with learning that game. So back to the timeline, these young people with no experience on the Hill or in politics at all get to DC. Do you find that when they look at the game of politics head on as it is firsthand, do they come to DC with sort of like rosy colored glasses, and they're like, oh, I thought politics was going to be something different, and they get blackpilled? Do you find that they're pretty in tune with what's going to be expected of them? Like, what's that actual connection look like when they arrive and they see the beast, the swamp, firsthand, full on?
Yeah, there are certainly a fair amount of them that come with rose tinted glasses right off the bat, and we take great pains to shatter those on the first day. And so we rolled out something this year. We started with a fellowship retreat So we rented out this lodge on the Eastern Shore in Maryland, and we did a whole weekend out there. And we brought all our, speakers out and basically said, this is what we're up against on trade, on immigration, on foreign policy. Here's who's paying for it all. Here's, who to watch out for. Here we do also like a professionalism lecture. Like, here's how you network with people, ladies. Here's when you can tell when someone's asking you for a networking coffee versus a date. Like, all of these things are very important to know when you're first coming to DC. And I think the thing that's unique about our model is being young guys. We really do know what we don't know. So we don't do like any of the lectures. I have one banked on like Arctic geopolitics if for some reason somebody drops last minute.
That's it. That's it. That's my Batman sign. You're there. Arctic.
Yep.
Boom.
Yep.
Nick Solheim.
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it. I got slotted in last year and I almost went for 2 hours, and finally someone said, please, can we go home? But aside from that, like, we don't really do any of the lectures. Like, we're bringing in these people that have been doing it for a lot longer than we have. We're really the nexus of bringing in the speakers and then the future talent. So I think we do a pretty good job of like, shattering those rose tinted glasses right off the bat. Let them know what's at stake, who you're up against, and the kinds of just absolutely insane things that go on in DC. I think that's very important.
Yeah, that makes sense. And going back to what you just said about being the nexus, I think the first time you and I spoke, I was very excited about American Moment precisely because it's sort of built on on very similar fundamental principles to what we're doing here in New Founding, which is on the right, you need to have these rallying points, these networks, ecosystems that can connect. You don't have to do it all yourself, but you can at least be the gravity well where, in your case, you have the people coming, the senators, the jobs, the opportunities, the speakers. And it doesn't mean you have to do every single piece together. You just bring them all together in a room and you can sort of air traffic control them into the right places.
Yeah.
And that it's, your guys are doing that. We're doing that. And so seeing that a lot of this is happening, there's small but mighty, groups like yours and ours and others that are doing this tells me there's this need on the right. There's just this need you mentioned, you referenced this earlier. The left does this really well. Patronage networks where they can, you come out of this job or you got burned there because of something you did or something you said, or just the company exploded or the job disappeared, whatever. Don't worry, we got your back. We'll just recycle you through this program and boop, you end up at a much higher paying job. You end up here. They just have these networks built, which we've been lacking on this side. And it's cool to see you guys develop that gravity well in politics.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats, historically have been very good at this. Really, both parties. I mean, like in New York, you had Tammany Hall, right? Was the big, the big organization kind of deciding how the party went, both in New York and the nation. This has been something that's been possible for a long time, and both parties have used it when it's been convenient. And I think this is one of those times where maybe it's not convenient, but somebody really ought to do it. And since nobody else would, that's kind of how we ended up doing it.
Yeah. Do you see a common thread with some of the, like, maybe the best candidates or the best fellows that you guys have placed over the last, 4 years, 3-4 years? Like we, to give you some reference, like we have this idea in our mind of kind of like the kind of ideal guy that comes to New Founding, to the network, and we know what to do for them. We know there are jobs or opportunities awaiting them, and it doesn't mean that we don't serve anybody that's outside of that kind of shape or that thesis, that individual persona. But we know that person can, we can plug them in very quickly. Have you guys developed something like that? Is there something that stands out to you as a unique, like mighty individual in your mind?
Yeah, I would say the two biggest things are having something to lose and something to prove. Usually some of our best placements are guys that are married, have kids, really have something to lose if all this political stuff goes south. And then on the other end, guys who didn't go to college or maybe didn't go to the best college in the world or whatever. We have a guy in our fellowship right now who left he's in his late 20s and left his very high paying job at a bank to come and do this fellowship because he believes in what we're doing and believes in the part of the movement that we're in and really wants to affect change. And so he's like literally making a third of what he used to make to come and do this program and get involved in DC. And when people are willing to, put their, household and their reputation on the line to come and do something with all of us yokels and in DC, I think it says a lot. And it makes us that much more willing to fight for that person, to make sure that sacrifice isn't in vain. And that they are able to prove that they're capable of actually making change, despite their background or their marital status or how many kids they have or whatever. There's this kind of peak ideal in DC of like the single man or woman who like made it to the top, and you're a chief of staff and you're like in your mid to late 30s. And if you have a household at all, it's probably like in ruins, and more than likely you don't. And so what we are really passionate about is bringing these kinds of people that are, that actually care about their families. And that's the big, motivating factor into why they're getting involved, because they want to still have a country for their children. This is their country too. And so having something to prove and something to lose are I think, two very high markers of like, okay, this is going to be one of our people.
Skin in the game.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, again, going back to what I was alluding to of having our own thesis area founding of the kind of person we are ideally helping and working with is somebody who has skin in the game, who is leaving a high-paying job at Meta or Google or whatever, and happy to take a pay cut, but also with a lot of upside for a startup or something like that. Those are the people who are clearly motivated to build in a particular direction that's outside of the norms.
I mean, we've got a guy in our fellowship right now that came to start our program like 4 days after graduating high school. And is like putting off school to come and do this. I hear stories like that, and you talk to the guy, presentable, intelligent, cares about, the same suite of issues that we care about. And it's a slam dunk. Like selling this guy is easy. It's a piece of cake. It's really our bread and butter.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you find, what do you find, if anything, that is missing when these young folks get to your program on the talking about indoctrinating them, I think is the word you used, on Fridays with the lectures and the program on Fridays? Is there so I'm asking sort of a theme question, but on the negative side, is there something that you see is missing when they arrive? Like you're like, they're really good on this, but they're generally, fellows that get accepted are deficient on immigration policy, or is there something that you think one of those levels or knobs needs to go up before they get to the fellowship that would be ideal for you guys?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a particular policy area as much as competency. So a lot of the guys that, get into our programming were radicalized by being on Twitter, so it's all these like
Many
short
such
little,
cases.
yeah, so true. Short little pieces of content, that radicalize them. They have all the right, ideas about what's wrong with our country, but don't really have any framework about like how to fix it. And so basically what we spend the whole summer doing is deep dives on these particular policy areas. So, that, high skilled immigrants are stealing American jobs. Let me introduce you to the H-1B visa. Here is where a lot of our problems are, and here's what to do about it. So we have actually tomorrow, Mark Krikorian from the Center for Immigration Studies is giving, this is his second lecture to the Fellowship of the Summer on immigration in particular, and it's because we place such a high priority on that issue, but also in actually being competent about it. It's not enough to say there are too many illegal immigrants, crossing the border, and that's leading to rises in crime. It's leading to, blue collar folks losing their jobs, and it's not enough to say that. We also have to talk about legal immigration and things that are wrong with our legal immigration system, and with all the visas that we offer, and how many millions of people we offer free entry into this country every year. And so that is something that we really place a high priority on, is not just being based online. In fact, we encourage most of them to please just don't tweet over the summer. It's going to be better for you if you don't. So we really want them to be competent on what we should actually be doing about these issues, and what are the particular policy areas that are going to be actionable, in the near to immediate future.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting, the Twitter to something pipeline, Twitter to new founding, Twitter to American Moment, Twitter to
it's a wild place. I thought there was a tweet this morning of you guys saw, perhaps it's a little off topic, you saw the Mark Zuckerberg Elon cage match potential, but the guy who actually made the tweet that was like, hey Elon, you should fight Zuckerberg, he's got 23 followers and an AOL.com email. So just this random guy can hop into the conversation with the billionaires of the world. It's just a really interesting time and place.
Yeah, just kick the domino effect of, hey, you should do this, and it's like, yeah, let's do it, and then Mark Zuckerberg taking it on, and
it's definitely a very big source of candidates for us is Twitter. Not necessarily that we find them on Twitter, but they find us. You don't have to be in these circles too long to run into either me or Sarab or the American Moment account or whatever. It's a pretty high value place for all the dumpster fires that go on a daily basis.
Yeah. Do you find the podcast is also primary sort of recruiting piece for you guys, or does it serve mostly a different signaling function toward the, let's say, business development or fundraising side of things?
Yeah, the podcast is interesting. We've never intended for it to be this huge, platform or like Joe Rogan style, listenership. That's it. If you're like a non-policy person and you go listen to 5 episodes, you'll probably be bored to death. And that's because really our target market is people that care about these issues, want to know what's going on, and what we should do about it. So, we have U.S. senators and members of the House that listen to our show. We have former cabinet officials that listen, and then all the way down to legislative correspondents in, this congressman's office that you've never heard of. And then people all over this country that really care about these issues and are looking to get involved. But it's not we're not raking in like tens of thousands of dollars a month from like sponsorship deals or anything like that. The only ads we ever run are for our programming, like to convince people to apply. That's it. So it does serve like a recruiting purpose in some sense. Like that's the main place that we plug our AmericanMoment.org/join, and I get a lot of submissions from that. But primarily it's an education platform for people that are working on these issues already.
That makes sense. I guess it also gives people a, if I'm in the Midwest, I'm at 22 or whatever, and thinking about applying, and I'm listening to the podcast, I can see that you guys are serious. By serious, I mean specifically, they had so and so on the podcast, and this other senator, and there's a sort of a social proof of work aspect to having a podcast like that enables people to think you to take you seriously.
Yeah, and we were talking about this before the show, but we have like fantastic set. It looks way more professional than we probably deserve, and we have a great producer and editors that kind of pull the whole thing together. But yeah, I think it looks super legit. Like I see clips from it on Twitter. I'm like, man, that looks great. We could each stand to lose like 10 to 15 pounds, but aside from that, it looks awesome.
Yeah. You are the Obama.
It certainly helps.
Giving yourself a medal. You're like, you see your
yes.
You're like, man, I look good.
Those guys are killing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Good job, me.
So I'm curious, since you guys are so much in the center of the business of placing people in politics, when you look at sort of like 2016 era and how the administration was put together then, and kind of the state of piping people into positions versus like a hypothetical 2024 pipeline into create an administration, what do you see as the sort of issues that were present in 2016 that created chaos or led to less optimal outcomes in terms of getting the right people in the right places versus what would be ideal in the future?
Yeah, so in 2016 and early 2017, I talked to a guy that knows this. He was there. Most of the administration was developed via Google Sheet. So like that's how people were getting their jobs. They were getting stacks of resumes and then putting names and contact information in a Google Sheet. So there was not a lot of preparation in 2016. I think what you're seeing now is there are a lot of great organizations putting a lot of thought into it this time. So Heritage has their Project 2025 that they're working on, and I know there are organizations all over DC that are building their own lists and that sort of thing. I think the thing that we're going to have to be on guard for is all the conservative organizations, good and bad, are going to try to get as many people into the admin as possible. And so what's really going to matter is those people at PPO and OPM in particular, the guys that are going to get to decide, and do the background checks and vetting on all the people that are going to serve in the administration. And I think we're pretty well prepared for all these different job candidates. I think what we need to prepare for a little more is all the bad actors there are going to be as well. There are going to be a lot of libertarian and neoconservative organizations that are going to use, whoever wins as an avenue to get their people back in. And I think we need to do everything that we can to prevent that.
Do you find that you compete? The left is a given, sort of enemy, a given opponent, but do you find, talk a little bit about the opponents on the right, as it were, what you just alluded to. There's the libertarians and the neocons who are not on the left, but you don't want their people on in those roles. You want your people in there, American Moment's folks there, not theirs. Talk about how that dynamic works out. Especially, what comes to mind is the no enemies on the right premise that Haywood and others have talked about. Curious how you guys think through those issues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really any scenario where like no bad guys get in. I think anybody, selling that is probably smoking something. Like there are billions of dollars put behind all of these institutions that have been around for decades, and they're going to push really hard to get some of their people in there. And I think our role and other organizations kind of in our section of the right, their role is to try to limit that happenstance as much as humanly possible. And I think that the things where it's going to be most evident are kind of our top three issues. It's going to be, a total free market perspective on trade, a total free market and humanitarian approach to immigration, and then a very like globalist and like the U.S. being the world's policeman view on foreign policy. Those three areas, I mean, there have been billions and billions of dollars spent creating those people, and these institutions are not going to let those dollars go to waste, and they're not going to let those people go to waste. And even in the cases where, good guys got in the Trump admin over, bad actors, the bad actors outside the administration spent the whole time trashing the administration for what it was doing. So these people need to not just be, not hired into the next administration, but we need to eliminate the perches that they're sitting on and talking from. We need to make clear that this is where the conservative movement is headed, and if you're not there, you've got no part in it. I think that's really going to be the key. We do need to have enemies to the left and gatekeep those people on the right of center that are too far to the left of us. I think we need to do a lot more of that. Gatekeeping is fine as long as we actually use it against the bad guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So between now and then, between today and then 2025, what are you guys doing to prepare for the new admin, wherever that might land?
Yeah, so we're continuing to build out our list of vetted and credentialed people. We have about 2,000 people in our network that are already in DC, working, whether it's in a congressional office or an allied institution or a business or whatever. And then we've got thousands more in the heartland across this country. So continuing to build those lists, get people into the fight, get them promotions, from the jobs that they're currently in now, so that they can be battle tested and win some of these fights that we're having in Congress right now, so that they're ready for the much bigger fight of a new presidential administration.
How does that? You talk about credentialing, and fundamentally, that's obviously the American Moment Fellow credential. How does that percolate within the Hill? You place somebody, they get a job. How does that then percolate to somebody recognizing and saying, "Oh, this person's so good because they came from American Moment. Give me more American Moment people." What's that process like?
Yeah, so we have a very large, like these 2,000 people are people that we would write recommendation letters for, people that we would advocate for behind the scenes. That stuff happens on a daily basis. It happens all the time. And then as it relates to, an actual credential that you can put on your resume, we do this series of programs. It's called Foundations of American Statecraft. And it is a credentialing program for people who are already working in the movement. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're working for a member of Congress. You may be, at a conservative organization or an allied business, but you care about a particular policy area. So this is a 10-week long program that we do. It's 3 hours, one night a week. And we bring in these lecturers, and they do 3 hours on one topic. So we have one that's actually starting next week on foreign policy. It's a 10-week long program on foreign policy. And these lectures are on everything from nuclear energy and weapons, like 3 hours just on that from one lecturer, to naval and sea power, to diplomacy with dictators, all these things that you need to know if you're going to be working in foreign policy, wherever you are in the movement, and then hopefully eventually in the administration. We do a test at the end of this program, like a practical test. So what we did for the foreign policy one last year is we said, China has just invaded Taiwan. Here's where the carrier groups are. Here are all the, economic tools available. Here are the bills currently on the floor. Advise this member of Congress, and we brought in an expert. Advise this member of Congress on, what they should do. And I truly think that tests don't have meaning if you're not willing to fail people. And so we did fail some people. And that's what actually gives that credential meaning. So we've got a bunch of people, out there, they're American Moment, Foundations of American Statecraft certified on the issue of foreign policy. They have it on their resume. We help these people, write letters to their boss saying, I, as an extracurricular, went through this program because I really care about this issue. As you see fit, I would like to spend more time working on this issue, hopefully eventually, get a promotion into a role that deals with it more heavily. So that's another way that you can, it's just like a little chit for our people, that they can put it on their resume. They get a little bit of money if they pass the test, and we can reward our people that way and give them another credential that might be the last straw that gets them the job or gets them that promotion or whatever.
That's super cool. I like the idea of the test, not just like check the box, fill in the blank. What did you learn this last 10 weeks? But here's some real-time Age of Empires scenario.
Yeah.
What would you do?
Yeah, you can tell.
War?
You can tell it was devised by a bunch of dudes who played too much video games, growing up. Like that's definitely it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Nick, we're coming to the end of our time here, but couple of last questions for you. So, what's next for American Moment? Just beyond the admin, like what's your vision for it? Where would you like it to grow and go?
Yeah, I would say that we really don't spend too much time like holed up somewhere, stroking our chins about like what are our plans for world domination or whatever. I think part of what grounds us is having your head down every day, like making sure that everything is continuing to run how it should, and that we're actually being successful. But I think that the biggest metric of success for us is an ever continuing segment of the right being our people, people that have been through our programming, people that have been to our events, our conferences, people that listen to our podcasts and are influenced by the kinds of things that our guests are talking about and working on. That is really the metric for success for us. None of us envision like parlaying this into an admin job or into making a lot of money or whatever. This is truly, and I've done a lot of things, everything from what I'm doing now to like, driving delivery for Jimmy John's over lunch. And this is by far the best job I've ever had. And so really what we're focusing on is just continuing to grow incrementally where we can, and to create a larger section of the right that is highly attuned to the issues that we care about, and really that the American people care about.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely an important need. And as we've spoken over the last hour and a half, putting the right people in the right places in politics, in business, just across the board can definitely move the needle in a particular direction. Last two questions we ask every guest, the black pill and the white pill question. Black pill is what's worst, what's more challenging in your industry, in your part of the world, in politics than most people realize.
Yeah, going back to where we started this episode, the decisions made in DC are frequently made by the most mediocre people in this country. They're people who are very highly educated, have been to the best universities, but no real world experience or anything to struggle for. There's a very high case of, or high amount of cases of failing upward. We just did a podcast episode with a guy. His name's Will Tebow. He's at the Claremont Institute, and he's doing a project there about how you destroy wokeness in the military. And he was talking about this guy that's he's nominated to get another star on his uniform, and he's been leading the Air Force at a time when less than 60% of our airmen and our aircraft are available to fly. And usually the benchmark in the Air Force is like 70%. You want 70% of your aircraft and your airmen to be up in the air at the drop of a hat. And we've fallen far below that under what this guy has been doing. And instead of being punished, they're bringing him in front of these hearings and these members of Congress and talking about, this guy is so diverse. He's a person of color, and he's been doing these great DEI initiatives, and it's been so good for our diversity in the military. And you know what? We're going to give this guy another star. And it's like, am I taking crazy pills? Like, this guy sucks at his job. He's terrible. Why are we giving him a promotion? He sucks. And this is just so endemic in DC. Everything from the military to conservative organizations. You see this at play, with the war on terror and our invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. None of these people have faced any consequences at all. This is a town where you can only fail upward. And so I guess my black pill is as bad as you think it is, and however stupid you think these people are, it's worse than you think.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. So you've black pilled us. Now, what's the white pill?
Dude, the white pill is we do these fun parties once a quarter for all the people in our network. So we invite them all, and they show up. We usually have a fun theme. We print T-shirts. So like last year, our summer party last year was party hard and carry a big stick. And I have a buddy that's a caricature artist in Minnesota, and he did a caricature of TR riding on a horse with a big stick, chasing after the Facebook, Amazon, and Google icons, and they were like running away from him, terrified. We just threw one of these last week. It was called Havana Syndrome Summer, and we did a caricature on the front. It was Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, John Bolton, and I'm blanking on who the last one was. But they're all like dazed by this, supposed Russian laser that was like, making people's minds melt.
Yes.
And it turns out they did, like, the Democrat-led Senate did an investigation on this. It was totally psychosomatic. It was literally made up, not even real. So we did this caricature of them on the front, And then on the back was this caricature of Tucker Carlson in a tinfoil hat. And he's like standing there, smugly, obviously not dazed by it at all, because it's not real. And so, we had 250 people at this event, and just going around and talking to these people, spending time with them, sharing a cigar with them, we do have the best people, not just the best looking people, but the smartest people, the most virtuous people. It's really, it's a huge white pill spending time with these guys, man. These guys and gals. I'm on a high for weeks after, because we've got some of the brightest people, the people most motivated, and frankly, like, they refuse to take the black pill. They're here for a reason. They're trying to do something that matters, and I believe in it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's 100% agree. I think we see the same here in your founding, and even the events that I've been at with you. I mean, just the people that are on our side who are ready to go are incredible. We just need to give them a target, let them look.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, man. Hey, dude, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was great chatting with you, learning more about American Moment, the intricacies. Where can people listening to this find you guys, get involved, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so our website is americanmoment.org. You can go and check out all of our programming. You'll find our podcast there as well. It's called Moment of Truth. I'm on Twitter at Nick S. Solheim. And then my email is nick@americanmoment.org. If you have any listeners that are interested in getting involved, feel free to just shoot me an email.
What's your address?
It's pretty easy to remember.
Phone number.
My home address is, my mother's maiden name is, no, just kidding.
What was your
Please don't ask me those.
Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. We'll put all those things in the show notes, so people can check out American Moment, and the best people, the best good looking people on our side. Dude, thanks so much for coming on, Nick. Again, good to see you. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. You as well.